Record. All right. Hi, Julie.
Hi, John.
Back again for some Zoom discussions today on social media. I guess the purpose of this discussion that we're going to be taking today is to look at sort of, a timeline, a little bit of where social media has come from. Look at a little bit of, kind of who coined the phrase social media, what it means both for the world a little bit, and then really look at education and the pros and cons of social media in the classroom. Being such a new type of educational tool, there's a lot of discussion about, is it good for education or is it not good for education? So start out with, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen and show the presentation. Oh no, there we go. Okay. Okay, so let's get back to the beginning. So social media discussion. So I was very interested in this when I started talking about social media and starting to see like where we went with social media, like where did this, topic come from? Where did it originate? Where did the term social media come from? And the idea of, why is it called social media? The AOL executives that coined the phrase were more just talking about the idea of social discussions. What they were trying to do at the time for AOL was create an instant messenger service, which is, a real-time discussion, in other words, because they were seeing that everything was asynchronous communication instead of, just emails and things like that, where you send a message and stuff. And so what they were talking about was having a more social discussion online.
Yeah.
As with most things, and you're talking about a term being originated, that there's a bunch of people who say they did it first. So, when you're looking at where the term originates, the article that I found listed about 4 different people, including Shirky, if you know her name, Tara Shirky. She's the executive of AOL. She's pretty famous in the thing. She sort of takes responsibility for coining the phrase in the early 1990s. I'm going to click to the social media timeline really quick just to give us a quick view of where social media has come over the last few years. So this is the timeline that we have, and I think it's very interesting that this timeline is interesting because I didn't realize that StumbleUpon was so old. I only learned about StumbleUpon about 2 years ago.
Yeah. And who's even heard of Friendster? I mean, it's funny. That was the first one. You're like, oh, I missed out on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised. I remember when Gmail, it's kind of dates me on this one, but I remember when Gmail became really popular, probably about 2006, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was switching over. I mean, again, before you really knew the potential of having a Gmail address, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, in fact, it was my first year of teaching, actually, interestingly enough, that I got a beta account for Gmail, one of the very first ones that had, and, they used to give you the invites that you could invite your friends to. And I remember, one of my friends was like, you got to try this new email system. It's terrific. I got an account for my dad and, all these things. And I was like, all right. And I started sending them out to my friends and everybody was like, this is terrific. And so I thought that was interesting. I think the other thing that's interesting about this timeline is to see the different things, like in 2002, there's this techno ratty. I don't think that exists anymore. I did a little search on it. I couldn't even find it. Things like MySpace, who has a MySpace account anymore? So it's interesting to see that there's already social medias that were huge at one time and that are now already sort of gone.
Well, I thought it was interesting. I didn't realize that MySpace and Facebook were just 2 months apart in creation, which is just bizarre that because MySpace was so in for about a year or two. And then it was just this quick turnover where everybody's sort of dropping out of it. So I thought that was really interesting. And in 2007 was the iPhone somewhere on there. Yeah, yep. The iPhone. I remember that. And boy, has that specific smartphone in our hands changed the face of everything. Social media, and definitely has changed the face of how we communicate with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's pretty interesting as you go through the thing and you start getting up closer and closer to the time where we are, seeing how many people, like, they keep showing the users that, there's 202 million users of WordPress around the world. I mean, who knew that was such a, I know WordPress, I've used it, but I had no idea that it was used by so many people, and as you see the numbers get bigger and bigger as we get closer to the end and to the present day, those things, it really shocked me.
Yeah.
So, let's switch
I
back.
thought the 2011, the baby named Facebook was crazy in Egypt when Egypt shut down their internet access during the revolution, temporarily trying to stop kind of the movement and in honor of the role social media actually played in that revolution, that somebody actually named their baby Facebook in Egypt. Like,
I know. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
To
The
think of
potential is definitely there. And, I think that's one of the interesting things to see is that, what the uses are. And, it's just like anything that's internet based, when it comes out, everybody goes, this is a terrific tool. And then it always progresses somewhere else, it seems like, or, these different things come in and different ideas and different uses for things come in. And, like I said, in another 20 years, it probably won't look anything the same.
Yeah. Isn't that strange? And I had watched the video, the 90 seconds, the history of social media in 90 seconds. And I'm sure anybody out there in the class that watched that video, I don't think that's the one you will watch, but the thing I gathered from it more than anything is I should be coming up with some sort of social media and making a lot of money off of it. Like, I mean, Justin Timberlake bought MySpace in 2011 for 33 million. I don't know why, to be honest, he bought that. But I mean, like, Tumblr selling to Yahoo for 1.1 billion. Snapchat is worth 2 billion. Facebook, the year after it was created, or 2 years after it was created, is worth 15 billion. Like, we're in the wrong jobs. That's kind of what I get. Like,
I completely agree.
In the world, that's insane how social media has really changed the face of how we interact.
Yeah.
It's become it's a marketing tool more than anything.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. The explosion is there. So kind of getting into a little bit more for those of us, I went out in my search to try to find kind of the origins of everything and looking through these kind of things. I thought this was a very interesting definition. This is what Wikipedia does. A group of internet-based applications that build on the ideological and technological foundations of Web 2.0, and that allow the creation and exchange of user-generated content. And I think it does sum it up quite well. I think the interesting thing about it is that it is this user-generated content. I think that is the key to social media. I watched the Clay Shirky video on the TED Talk on the Clay Shirky put out about how the social media could change the world. And in his video, he talked a lot about how there was an earthquake in China a few years ago, and in the Shenzhen province, and that people were reporting on this earthquake. And with social media, the actual citizens are there on the ground, and as it's happening, they're posting to social media, and I think it's so interesting. I think it's so interesting how he also said in there that the governments, the U.S. Geological Foundation Society or whatever that tracks earthquakes, they had the information out 2 hours after the event, and there were already live feeds going for it.
Yeah, and one of the articles I was reading, it was talking about how traditional media right now is, like you're just saying, it's like one of the quotes I took from this article is traditional media struggles to keep up with the powerful exchanges happening in Twitter feeds and blog posts. Like, I mean, we see it all the time, like in the examples you're giving, but it could be as simple as, you watching the news in the morning or the evening, and what are they doing? They're going to tell you what's trending on YouTube or what was trending on Twitter, or how that's affecting things. And so it is, it's a different world we live in, more than anything, as to how social media can really be a force of change. And I think it's still in its infancy. One of those beginning stages to really figure out what it's going to look like. And it's much more powerful than, hey, I took this quiz on which character I am in a TV show, or a picture of what I ate for dinner. Right. It's than that. And the article, it was the author of the author of the article was the founder of eBay, and he said, you know, actually, he said he thinks it's one of the largest, you know, leaps forward human history has made in recent years as far as
that's one of the things Shirky was talking about in his video as well, that he thinks that, you know, he compared it to movable type and things like that, but he says that, you know, it allows users to have more social connection and social expression than ever in human history. And I can't seem to disagree with that by any means.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on a little bit. Kind of continuing, you know, I really tried to go through, and it's an interesting thing because, you know, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to find, you know, the basis for what makes social media connect to us as human beings. And, you know, I think these are the terms that as I read through various articles, that I kept pulling down. You know, that it is a form of expression. You know, you can express yourself in various ways, you know, things like Twitter, there's always people doing different things and stuff like that on Twitter. It provides a connectedness. Even when we can't be connected physically, we can still be connected, you know, via online information. I find the flow of information, you know, I had used Twitter a few years ago in classes and stuff, and I had kind of gone away from it, but I've re-gotten into it a little bit and learned it a little bit better. And I'm finding it to be a great source of information for me. I keep finding terrific links, and I've subscribed to all these feeds, and I continually find things that I tell people about and use in my classes and stuff like that. So I think that's really interesting. Collaboration, you know, where people they're basically building online discussions in real time, you know, and I think that's really interesting. And then go ahead.
I think it's interesting because I've been challenged in a few classes to use Twitter, and it has definitely changed my view of it. I gave up on it like 5 years ago. Like did one tweet, maybe did 4 tweets, and then I was done. And so this has been interesting to get back into it and to really experience it on a professional level. I actually really am surprised that I like it, but I think from a point of view as far as an education, another article I was reading, it said that, you know, that social media is much more effective, and they're finding easier uses for it in online courses. So if it's a hybrid course or an online course, you're going to have a much easier time finding a use for Twitter or social media in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
You know, one professor, I saw this on this article, one of the professors, he actually challenges his students. One of the first assignments is to create a 15-second Instagram video and post it, you know? So connecting his students in a totally different way than.
Yeah, that's a great, and I think there's tons of things like that people haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, we talked a lot about this, and we'll kind of glance over it, but, you know, social media bringing to the world, you know, we talked a little bit about it, but it's the citizen reporters, you know, that unfiltered information. You know, I think that's one of the keys, and I really kind of wanted to focus on, is that it can be a detractor for education, but in the world, getting unfiltered information is a rarity, even in you know, free speech countries like the US. You know, it runs through, you get reporters, you get media, and we see that there is, no matter what, there's bias in a lot of cases. And, you know, we see things like the Brian Williams thing lately, you know, with how stories get made up and all these kind of weird things, you know. And it's, so to me, it's almost like direct reporting, you know, unfiltered, like kind of raw information. I read an article about a guy who was talking about an app called Periscope. And Periscope actually is, it's the same thing that Meerkat does. They both are video feeds to Twitter. And he was using it because he's a designer, and he works in an area where Twitter is actually. And so he came across a burning building one day, and the police were running up. And so what he did was he filmed the entire thing on a live feed to Twitter. And in 8 minutes, he had 50 some people following him, making comments, and all kinds of things. And I was just, he's saying there's no news cameras around. Nobody would have ever gotten this information except for the eyewitnesses. And he did.
Wow.
Yeah. I thought it very, very interesting.
And then you see countries like where you are in China, where we see massive government suppression of it, where they're imprisoning bloggers and doing intimidation, you know, on these people that are trying to use social media against the government. So they're really trying to use it as thought control. So it's interesting. I don't know how successful they are with stopping people from communicating, or if they're just going underground more than anything, but
I think they find ways around it.
yeah. But what an interesting way to protest against your government
Yeah.
online.
Yeah, and I think we see it a lot in different, even in China and places like Egypt and all those kind of things. We see that happening all over the place.
Yeah.
So now shift a little bit towards education. These are some facts that I found out about as I was doing my research, and so I thought all of these were really interesting facts because it is, and these were a little bit older. This is 2014, so these are about 2 years ago. So from 2012 to 2013, social media use increased 21%. And at the end of the article, they were saying that they were going to put another article out in 2014, but they wouldn't be surprised if that doubled. So interesting.
Wow.
59% of educators polled believe that social media increased learning, or at least opportunities for learning. 56 believe that it can distract. They can distract students. There is the possibility for distraction. However, that even with that 50%, 56%, possibility thing for distraction, that they believe that social media increases interaction. Almost everyone. I mean, 79% of people believe that it does increase interaction. And I will tend to say that when I've used it in class, I see kids making posts at 11 o'clock at night, and they're like, oh, have you seen this? Or you've done these sorts of things, I found this while I was on Tumblr or whatever, and I get that kind of thing all the time. So I do think that the interaction aspect is there.
That's pretty cool. One of the articles I was talking about said one of the concerns that I hadn't thought about in a while, just because I don't use it necessarily for grades very often, is, the academic integrity of it. And who's to say that maybe like their friend isn't just posting for them for an assignment if they're trying to do it for a grade, if it's something like that. I think that that's really probably few and far between that it happens. But I mean, again, there's a lot of anonymity with that when we're not exactly sure, it's like the computer confirms that's who the person is. But I think that's the least of our worries. If the kids are already online, social media is engaging for them as a whole.
Yeah, and they're using it constantly. Yeah, absolutely. So, what can social media bring to education? On the good side, these are things that social media can do, and these are some of the different things that I found in various articles. I think the one that really sticks out to me the most is that I'm finding as I'm using Twitter again is the awareness about world events. When I first moved to China, I like for the first couple of months, I felt like I was in a vacuum. Like people were messaging me on Facebook from America, like, "Did you know about this?" And I had no idea. And now that I'm, gotten in the last few months, and I've been using Twitter and some other things to, keep myself informed, I'm finding that I'm almost more connected than I ever have been, and I'm, thousands of miles away.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think in the education, one of the big things that, there's talked about a lot is the communication factor. It's always been a challenge to communicate with all stakeholders, keeping parents informed and students on the same page so that everyone knows what's happening. And that was one of the things that I saw in more than one article, is that communication with stakeholders.
Yeah, I think social media is such a powerful tool. I think most educators, unless you're actually in online education, most educators are still really frightened with how to use it. And so we're not really sure what to do with it or how to use it in class unless you're using it on an LMS, a learning management system like, Blackboard or, Edmodo or something like that. And so that becomes a little bit trickier for some of us to figure out what does it look like? How do I use Twitter, and how do I require kids to do it, or do I not require kids to get online? And you've got the parent consideration. So there are some interesting factors that have to be taken into consideration, but I think it really has the possibility of moving things.
And then on that same note, like I read about a law in somewhere in the Midwest. I want to say it's Missouri. I believe it was Missouri, that it's illegal for teachers to contact students in Missouri on anything but a school approved program or software. So then you start thinking about like, well, we're trying to bring these things into class, and that sort of thing is happening. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. Hey, take a look at your chat, by the way.
Okay.
But no, I think that's really a valid point. That you know, I mean, I was told at one point I can use Facebook. And then all of a sudden, no, I can't use Facebook to communicate. You have to have all these signed forms. And it wasn't like I was their friend. I had in the past, I haven't done it in a while, but I was creating groups for certain classes where I might give them a reminder, hey, don't forget you have a test today, or don't forget, you know, or here's a really cool link to something that might help you study. So things like that. And I was told, you know, again, I don't think even in education our administrators knew what to do with it. They didn't know how we should take it, like what it was going to look like for us, you know, what kind of restrictions. And so then they all of a sudden say, no, you can't communicate with them that way. And I don't know. So I think a lot of our administration have gotten to the point of saying that's dangerous. There's too many liabilities there. And so we don't want you to get into that, when that's a little bit of an overreaction, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. And then I think it was on the timeline that they said that the mom sued and said that she couldn't even contact her own daughter because of the law.
Yeah, it was a teacher. Yeah, that was in Missouri. Yeah, it was that teacher. And she said, you know, this lawsuit makes it illegal for me to even contact my own daughter.
Yeah.
She's in the district as a student. So
very interesting. Well, why don't we go ahead and watch the video that we selected real quick, social media and education. Then we'll get to the last couple slides of our PowerPoint.
Okay.
With an ever-increasing number of students spending their time on social media networks like Facebook, Twitter, blogs, Pinterest, Tumblr and even LinkedIn, educational institutions can easily reach prospective students according to their choice of interest and availability online. Social media networks like Facebook act like a bridge between a school and its students. Students can share their ideas and assist each other on technical issues. They can also network with other students in the same university and in other universities. Some institutions might contemplate the integration of social networking and consider it as a distraction. But in fact, social networking acts as a learning tool in a dynamic, virtual world which influences social learning and student engagement amongst each other, promoting university values. From a marketing perspective, education brands can reach their target market more easily than ever. With demographic advertising, search marketing and banner advertising, education brands can become a part of their prospective students' activities online. Facebook acts as an interactive portal where relevant content is updated by the institution and opinions are shared by students. It also acts as an acquisition tool for prospective students and helps engage in conversation with them.
Interesting about the party at my place on Saturday, I thought.
Okay. Yeah, I love that they can still have fun with it.
I know.
We at Wiz Media empower institutions with intriguing and engaging content, which ensure high interaction with prospective students. The most popular and crucial social media marketing tool is Facebook ads. This genius algorithm helps you target and acquire prospective fans across countries, interests, age, jobs and even other institutions. We at Wiz Media assist you getting the most cost-efficient and targeted campaigns based on strong return on investment principles. World's most popular microblogging site, Twitter, can help your education brand in quickly gaining an identity online. Twitter is gaining popularity in students looking for relevant content from official channels of an institution.
It's interesting. This is from an advertising perspective.
I know, that was one of the reasons I wanted to show it, because I feel like the interesting...
Students can learn about educational events and tweet about them to their friends and followers. Learn about new trips and exchange programs across the world, or even get to know when the school is off for holidays. Twitter empowers educational institutions with immediate distribution of information. Any important update is present online for anyone to check. With more and more students preferring to check Twitter over notice boards, newsletters, RSS feeds, etc., social media marketing is inevitable for educational institutes. Social media networks allow students to connect with the faculty and other students as friends, relationships, share data with peers and groups to collaborate and discuss their curriculum. Students use various online applications to organize events, set deadline reminders, and deliver projects in sync with peers. Get started now. Visit www.vismedia.com.
The rest of it's just the ending there. So, yeah, you mentioned the media aspect. It was one of the reasons that I kind of thought it would bring up an interesting discussion for us, was that, I feel a little bit like, we see it as teachers, we see the potential that it has. However, we're also getting sort of it jammed down our throats in some ways. Everybody's saying, oh, it's got this great potential, you need to use it, you need to integrate it. And I think some of us, and you kind of mentioned it with like the plagiarism or that kind of thing, we don't really even know what the good and bad can be yet. So I think there needs to be some more, kind of a step back in some cases.
Yeah, and I think most of, at least the people I work with, it's much more hesitant to using it. Unless you're using something, because Schoology is what we use as our learning management system, and a lot of it looks like Facebook. It was designed to look like Facebook, to have that as social media appeal to them. They can like each other's comments. They don't have to just comment. They can actually hit a like button, which the kids think is hilarious. They can update their profile. So they're trying to make these learning management systems that are really safe places, that they're not protected, it's not just out there, parents don't have to be concerned about. So it's interesting to see how social media is impacting how we do everything in the classroom. But again, it is something to take slower at certain points too.
And as we move forward, the next slide is, what kind of problems can it bring? A couple of the articles I read were about the pros and cons of social media in the classroom. And so, I think there is, we've even touched on some that are not in the presentation, increased opportunity for distraction, maybe decreased human-to-human interaction, which I know is a problem in some places. Those kinds of things. Cyberbullying is always something that needs to be, looked at. There's been some very high-profile cases and things like that over the time. So, all right, so summary. Right? Social media, and to me, has tremendous potential in education, but I think we've touched on it. The time and development are still needed. Educators and innovators need to develop with students in mind. Like you said, Schoology and Edmodo, they're designed to look a little bit like Facebook and have some features like that, so that it is still bringing in those aspects that the kids like, that they're interested in, that captures their attention, but that is in a safe environment still, that is controlled by the teacher.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, especially at the younger ages. If you're teaching elementary school, you don't want, and as a parent, there's no way I want my kids to be doing Twitter, or they're not even allowed on those things for a reason. And so those in the younger grades really have to be careful about what they're really doing and how they're, even having kids post on a blog that's out there on the web versus on a learning management system is really different. And so it's something that educators have to really look into and keep in mind the safety of their students.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, good discussion on social media.
Yeah.
All right. See if I can find out how to stop the video. Okay, I think, there we go. We're done, right? Stop.